I do have a good question here. And Bruce, I think I'm going to direct this question to you. Goran would like us to speak to the M10 objects that Exact is writing versus the WiSys objects that we've been discussing today. So Bruce, do you want to take that question?
I think one of the biggest differences, I'm sorry, my mic down. One of the big differences at this point in time, Exact has been building objects mostly around table maintenance. They have done, I think, something related to the order object and the PO object. We have always been focused more on the transactional side, which is a much more complex side of Macola, and there's a lot more going on to build transactional objects. So if you're going to be doing transactions, I do not know when they're going to get around to doing those. I do not know what the exposure level is of those objects. I have not tried to directly call them, so I can't tell you how that. I don't think there's any documentation at this point as to even how to instantiate and call them and create a connection. And I also know to this point they have not incorporated MacLock control into any of their objects, which the foundation to concurrency in Macola is the logical lock capability. We've got 11 years experience in building scalable high-end objects. So, I mean, we have a lot of runway ahead of them. If they become available to you, it's up to you whether you want to engage and try to use them. I think the only other thing is that the objects they've built have had very little exercise. Our objects have been on the market for 11 years. We have 300 customers, and whether you're using our objects, coding directly to them, or you're wanting one of our applications, everybody's using our objects, even if they're just running an application. So our objects at this point, are very mature, 11 years, and millions and millions and millions of transactions.
So basically, our people, if people have questions about the Exact objects, they're going to need to speak to Exact. But for the most part, our objects are listed. We know what we have. We can answer questions about those. So I think
it's out there, and they're documented. And
right. Goran has a follow-up question here, Bruce, saying that they use OEM and Pop. If they just update to the 4.1 files, will that work, or is there any issues to be anticipated?
Are they coding directly to them, or?
Yes, they are. Yeah, this is.
I mean, Bryce showed you how to change. I mean, so all you really need to do is take your Visual Studio project, and as Bryce showed you, just flip the references from the 3.0 object to exactly the same named 4.1 object, and all the methods and properties are identical, and that's it in the project. Oh, and then you need to change your Visual Studio project over to a .NET 4 project if it isn't already, and that's it.
Okay. Jerry wants to know if 64-bit is coming soon.
Our objects are let me see, maybe Bryce should talk about that. I'll talk about one thing. We developed our objects to be, I don't know, Bryce, can you help me here in terms of, they're neutral between 32 and, what's the term for that? I think Bryce is muted.
Bryce?
Thank you, Kai. I had problems unmuting myself. Yeah, our objects are developed using any CPU platform.
That's right. So
for the target, yeah. So they're developed with any CPU. The executables themselves remain in 32-bit.
yeah, we did take our so the way it works is if you build a 32-bit executable and you use our objects, then because they're any CPU, then they will be a full 64-bit project, and the objects will be at full 64-bit. We originally tried to take our Agility products, our Explorer, over to 64-bit, and there's a penalty for going to 64-bit. There's more overhead. They ran slower. Even Microsoft documentation recommends that you do not build a 64-bit application unless there's a reason for being 64-bit. Like case in point, you would need to be able to build a grid that has to contain 1 million records or something like that, and you need to have access to a 64-bit memory space. So in light of that, we went back to 32-bit executables.
Okay, I'm just looking to see. Brian was asking about where are documents that outline and detail the objects in, and I pointed him back to Agility Explorer for the list of the objects that that Randy showed. Let's see, what else?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Brian was asking where is documentation about the objects that we have, and I pointed him back to the list of objects in Agility Explorer.
I would like to say that one thing about that, I mean, yes, if you're using our objects, you can go to that Agility Explorer piece that's in the system utilities is a great app. I don't think a lot of people are aware of that, but if you're trying to find something in our system, it's a great way to go find them, and you can filter on component type, as Randy was showing. In terms of our object list, it's even bigger than what Randy was talking about. There's a lot of our objects that are not exposed to Agility. They're at a more maybe what I would call primitive level, but still public for a programmer. So there are some things you can do as a programmer that does not make sense for us to do in Agility. And so the object list is even bigger for development purposes.
And I think that's what Brian is looking for, is more information to define the SDK, the objects better.
In terms of the total capability of the system?
Well, he's asking for SDK definitions. That's what he put in the chat window.
Yeah, okay, so we've been asked before to try to list everything that we do, and we've tried to put some documentation together on that. So if we say we do an order entry object, when we put together an object like order entry, we try to make that product so robust that every capability of order entry is there. And that's why I mentioned before, if we've missed a feature and we get asked to add it to the product, most often we'll go ahead and add that feature if we somehow missed it. So like this last release of the last build 564, we had some people coding over in Europe that were doing a lot of multi-currency transactions. And we ran into some multi-currency features in PO that weren't working exactly correctly, and we went ahead and fixed those and updated the PO. So if we say we have that transaction, we try to make it as robust as every feature capability as Macola would offer. So it's kind of hard for me to explain what we do have and don't have. Well, what I like to do, if people are going to buy or use our SDK and they have a project in mind, the best thing to do is to talk to us about the project you intend to take on if it's not clear that the objects aren't there.
Bryce is also suggesting that that Brian could use the object browser inside of Visual Studio to see objects and methods and properties. Or you can always give us a call and I can put you in touch with Bryce. So I also do want to run this last poll about whether the webinar has been helpful to folks. So I'm going to launch that poll right now, but we've still got another minute or two if you want to put in a couple more questions. Now Brian's asking about method signatures, and now I'm not even sure what he's talking about, Bruce or Bryce.
That's Bryce.
Sorry, I didn't. What was the question about method signatures?
This is Brian asking about objects, methods, properties, and method signatures for the objects.
Yeah, our online documentation is not a complete set of documentation for our objects by any means. Currently, you know, probably the easiest way to see what is available to you is to just open up Visual Studio and just you know, pick your module. You know, if you're trying to work with OE, you're going to want to point to the OE object and then just sort by your public methods. And then inside of Visual Studio, of course, in the object browser, you can see those public methods, the parameters that are required for the method, and then the object properties that are associated with the particular class. So yeah, as of right now, that is really probably the easiest way to see the complete list of what is available to you with the SDK.
And Glenn says that the object browser in Visual Studio will show you all the methods and the properties. A couple people have asked if they can get the project that you showed today, Bryce, and I'm sure we can get that. That's not on the web currently, is it?
No, that particular, the last project, the example project, comes down in your 564 build, but the SDK, the sample project I spent most of the time on is not on the website yet, but yes, we can certainly distribute that.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I don't think we have any other comments or questions here. Bruce, do you have anything else before we close? I think we're just about done.
I'm trying to think of anything that came to mind that we might have. Well, I don't think so. I think we covered it. I guess I just want to make, I think Randy made it pretty clear that since 562, if you have a project that was written calling any of the objects that we publish, like the inventory transaction or a receipt or whatever, and you call that in a Design Studio project of your own. And again, you used our published distributed objects. Because the objects are pointed to by an identifier, then you don't really directly reference the objects in Agility, you just point to them. And now that we've updated the objects in that pointer, then all your projects will automatically be updated to the 4.1 objects, and you don't have to do anything if you've done that in development and Design Studio on your own. If you have recaptured those objects, as he said before, which is really important on your own, not that the 3.0 objects won't continue to work, but you do want to start thinking about re-referencing your captured objects over to 4.1. And anybody that's done a project today in Visual Studio and cut it on your own, again, you know, there's no sunset right now on the 3.0 objects, but we're going to be doing all feature and bug fixes in the 4.1. So it's just to your benefit and time to get over and move your project. Again, if you've updated since 562 build, you have the 4.1.
And we have one final question from Thomas. He wants to know if it's possible to unconfirm ship a single serial or lot, or can you only, or is the only option to unconfirm the entire sales order line? Do we have a quick answer for him?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you confirm shipped 5 on one lot and 5 on another lot, and you want to just unconfirm, let me think about that. No, that's not true. You would have to unconfirm ship everything before you could, and then you'd have to reconfirm ship.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Bryce. Thanks very much, Randy. Appreciate everybody that was here and the good questions that we got from everyone. We will be publishing the webinar here. We did make a recording of it, so we will be publishing it, and we'll be getting the code that Bryce used, the example that he used, out on the web too. So appreciate all your attendance. Have a great afternoon. Thanks.